Now on to the somewhat dreaded dark art of camera menus. Now, I'll admit, I'm not that technical. I never have been. I don't really love delving into menus and figuring out how everything works. What I like to know is what's important. What do I need to know? What do I need to understand to manipulate to get me working quickly and efficiently? Now, we've covered off some of the key things in the menus already, but what I'd like to do now is take you through some other key menu functions which are really important when shooting movies, and really just things that I think will help you to work more efficiently. So let's delve into the menu and have a look at a few functions for you. So we're now looking at the camera menu, and we've covered off a lot of the stuff already, but I want to show you some other features which I think you might find useful. In the first menu, which is the camera menu, I want you to scroll along to the sub-menu number 3. This is where the menu begins with picture style. Now you'll notice I've highlighted here high ISO speed noise reduction. This is when you start to work at the higher ISOs. There are 3 levels of noise reduction. My advice is try these out depending on what you're filming. They have varying degrees of noise reduction. My personal preference is to apply noise reduction in post-production, but these will give you a reasonable result in 3 different strengths. Beneath that is highlight tone priority. Now, if you did want to use highlight tone priority, this is the menu where you'd switch it on. But as I said earlier, this camera is so good, I'd recommend avoiding highlight tone priority because of the increased noise it brings into the image. In the next menu along, we've got a couple of options here to do with the display. If you go down to grid display, you can set 3 different types of grids for different frame lines depending on how you like to work. Now, I've never found these to be particularly helpful, but perhaps if you're doing something that's particularly graphical, this might be of use. The 5th submenu is where the really interesting stuff happens. This is where you can assign time code, the silent control functions, and the movie shoot button. I'm going to start at the bottom, the movie shoot button. You can apply the movie start stop function to the front shutter release and the start and stop button, which means you can control it on the front of the camera and the start stop button. Silent control is where you can enable the silent control features of the quick control dial. This I would recommend having enabled. Timecode is if you want to actually record timecode to the material you're shooting. You can have it in record run or free run. Free run just takes the sync from the clock and will record a time of day timecode. Now, if you want to achieve this, you go to the manual input setting and set to camera time. The movie record count is selectable between recording time or the timecode, and the movie play count is set to record time or timecode. In the AF menu, there's nothing here that's going to benefit you when filming in movie mode. So just scroll through this and ignore all of these sections. Similarly, the play menu is just for stills. Again, in the spanner menu, the first page is all for stills. Auto power off is a function which I recommend you have a look at. Depending on what you're filming, it might be worth setting this to a duration which suits the project you're doing. Now, what you don't want to do is have the camera overheat, so having it disabled altogether may not be the right option, but 1 minute auto power off can be frustrating. So set this to a point where you feel comfortable. I'm going to set this to 15 minutes. Beneath this, you can set your LCD brightness to auto or manual, date and time, your language, and the viewfinder grid display. The submenu 4 is important for filmmaking. The video system should be set to PAL if you're in a PAL territory, and NTSC if you're in an NTSC territory. Sensor cleaning enables you to clean the sensor exactly when you want to, or automatically when the camera shuts down. I'd leave it set to auto cleaning so that every time the camera shuts down, it's going to give your sensor a clean. The info display button options can be useful. You can choose what you show up in your information display on the rear of the camera. The electronic levels are a really nice feature here. It allows you to level the camera on an X and Y axis. These are completely user selectable, so display what you want to see in the menu. The rate button functions are simply for stills recording. The custom shooting mode relates to the 3 custom function buttons on the mode dial. This is where you would register your settings and store them so you could manually select them at any time when shooting. The final menu here is largely related to stills and stills shooting. However, on page 2, custom controls, this is a really important menu because this is where you can assign different functions on the camera, particularly the set button. Its default is off, but what you want to do is set the magnifier to that button, which allows you to then punch in 5 times and 10 times and check focus when shooting in movie mode. So that's a really important one. Cropping information, again, is all to do with stills. And then clear all custom functions, well, that does what it says in the tin. Because the menus are so complex, you don't necessarily need every function every time you go in, and a lot of the functions in this camera are designed to be used for still shooting. So what you can do with My Menu Settings is register different settings that you're going to use frequently. So I would go down and put something like picture style in My Menu Settings. I might want to put in movie record size into My Menu Settings. The movie shooting button. And again, all of these are stills. So as you can see, there's a lot of options. Histogram display. There we go. So now what I've created in My Menu Settings is my own go-to fast track movie settings. I've got my picture style in there, my movie record size, my movie shoot button, my histogram display, and that's it. So it's a quick way to access the most common functions that you might want to access in a menu.